Hi, I'm back in the sewing room today and I'll be making this flower basket quilt block. And when I measure it out, when I'm finished, it'll measure at 12.5 inches square and finish in your quilt at 12 inches square. And it's a fairly easy block to make, but really beautiful. So let's get started. I'll show you how to make it. This block is made from 3 different patches: half square triangles, squares, and rectangles. Choose 3 fabrics, one for your flowers, background, and for the basket. From your background fabric, cut 2 rectangles 3.5 by 6.5 inches, cut 1 3.5 inch square, and cut 5 4-inch squares. From the basket fabric, cut 1 3.5 inch square and 2 4-inch squares. And from the flowers fabric, cut 3 4-inch squares. To make the half square triangle patches, we'll be using all 4-inch squares. For these with the flowers and the background, we'll use 3 background and 3 floral squares, and that'll make 6 of these half square triangles with the flowers. And then for these half square triangles with the pink basket, to make 4, we'll use 2 background squares and 2 pink squares to make the 4 half square triangle patches. This technique for making the half square triangles will make 2 half square triangle patches at a time. And if you have your own way of making half square triangles that you prefer, go ahead and use that technique. This one I'll show you is my favorite. So you just right sides together. Then on the back of each set, just on one of your fabrics, draw a diagonal line from one corner to the other. And I like to use a fine point pen. You can use a pencil. And then I'll repeat that on each of these other fabrics, and I'll actually do it on the back of this lighter color fabric so it's easier for me to see. And I'll sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance on each side of my line on each of my patches. I have my leader fabric and I have my seam allowance set at my regular 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I'll just line these up. You can pin them together if you like, and again 1/4 inch on each side. And I just kind of line up if it gets out of alignment. And then I'll feed the next ones right in. No need to tie off your thread or anything, just keep right on going. And once I have one side sewn, I will just clip these apart. And I'll feed in my next. Get it in the right direction here. And again, just keep right on going. And I'll clip these apart. Now I'll just cut right along my drawn line. And I like to use a smaller ruler for this. Like so, and then you can see you have 2 half square triangle patches. ready to be squared up, and I'll repeat this off camera with my other half square triangle patches. And press. And I'll be pressing toward my pink fabric and toward my floral fabric. And I'll repeat that off camera with the remaining patches. I have all the half square triangle patches that I need for my block. Before I can use them, I need to square them up to 3.5 inches square. So I'll use my square up ruler from Quilt in a Day and use whichever square up ruler you prefer. And I'll start by lining up my diagonal line here with my diagonal line on my ruler. And it's just important at this point to have a little bit of fabric beyond your 3.5 inch mark on all 4 sides. There won't be much, but you don't need much. So this I'll line up. I have a little bit of fabric here, 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 and here. And then I'll simply turn the patch around. I'll line it up the same way on the diagonal line. This time, however, I'll make sure that I'm lined up exactly at the 3.5 inch mark. I have a perfectly square 3.5 inch half square triangle patch. I'll repeat that same technique off camera with all my other half square triangle patches. Now I can lay out the block. I've got all my half square triangle patches. I'll start with one of my rectangles and just lay out these patches in their correct order. Now I'll start pinning some of the patches to get ready to sew. So right sides together. And I like to use my pin to indicate which direction I'm sewing. So I'll start here and sew in this direction. I'll start with these patches, take it over to the machine, and sew a scant 1/4 inch along here, 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 and here. Okay, I'll remove my pin, line up these patches. And then I'll just feed the next one right in. Clip these apart. And I'll take them over and line them back up with the rest of my block. I have my patches all laid out again, and I'll continue pinning. And it's really easy to get confused. That's why I like to do it in this manner, using my pins to show which direction I'll be sewing. And I can pin this side too. And I can do one more. Again, I'll take this to the machine. I'll sew scant 1/4 inch seam allowances all along here, and I'll do that off camera. Before I do any more sewing, I need to do some pressing. And I just want to make sure that in each row that I have so far that the seam allowances are pressed in the opposite direction. So I'll start with this row and I will press in this direction. And if you want, you can use a pin again just to indicate which direction you'll be pressing. This row, this direction. This direction. And this direction. And I'll remove that pin, set my seam, give it a little finger press. Then my next row. And again, I have my pin indicating which direction. And you don't need to do that. It's just a little, once in a while I need an extra reinforcement to remind myself. So now you can see they're going in opposite directions. And my next row. And off camera, I'll continue pressing this direction, and then my final row, I'll be pressing in this direction. Now that they're pressed, I will sew these two rows together. And these two. And it's crucial to match up these seams, so I'll use my temporary glue. It's from Sewline. There's others on the market. This just happens to be the one that I've been using lately. So I'll just put a dab right there. I'll match up those seams. And pinch, and that'll hold it until I'm ready to sew. And I'll do the same thing here. And I kind of like that it's blue. It's easy to see, but it comes right out with a little bit of water. Again, match up the seam and pinch. I'll repeat that on these seams here. I'll take these to the machine, a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance here and here. And I really like to use this little stiletto. It helps me through these matched up seams here. Just kind of give it a little press. It helps. And then I'll feed the next one right through. And I will see how they matched up. That looks great. And that looks wonderful. And again, I'll press these seams. I'll take this to the machine. I will sew my last piece on, and it should be simple sewing because there's no seams to match up. So I'll do that off camera, scant 1/4 inch right along here. I have this piece attached. I will go ahead and press this section here. And then finally, I will sew together these two sides. pin. And then off camera, I will again use my glue stick to match up these seams. Glue those. I will take it to the machine, a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance, right along here. And I'll give it a final press, set my seam. And the final measure, 12.5 inches square. There you have it, the Flower Basket Quilt Block. And this is a great block to place on point in your quilt project. That just means to set it in the shape of a diamond instead of a square. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.